Hi, I'm Nika Smith, a senior story producer here at Ancestry, and I'm super excited for you to join me today for beginning Native American genealogy on Ancestry. Please, as always, let me know where you are checking in from if you're watching live and you're in the chat. And also in this session, if you've had any oral history that has connected you back to a First Nations group or Native American group, Indigenous group in the United States, Canada, wherever else, please also chat with what that is and what you're trying to validate in your research efforts. As you can see, I am here representing the Cherokee Nation. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. I got that birthright through my grandmother. We're going to talk about her today. Also, you'll see some of the photos that are behind me. Those are my family members and ancestors who are connected back to the Cherokee Nation. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about that today. And so there's lots of folks commenting, people in Wisconsin, Virginia, Canada, Illinois. There's some Creek folks. Hey, speaking out to my fellow freedmen of the five tribes, if you are here. Folks coming in from Chicago, Kentucky, California, Texas, Alabama. Thank you all so much for joining us. There's a lot to cover today, and you're probably going to get quite a few answers. And as always, we are having this session because you all asked for it. So if you think that there should be a part two or you want to see me dig in a little bit further, be sure to use the chat. Be also sure to fill out your surveys afterwards. Would ask for feedback on what you want to learn about later. And then that way we can continue to have more sessions. All right. So lots of folks, Cherokee ancestors, lots of respective nations, Cree, Pabina. Wow. Shoshone. This is awesome. Great. Native American heritage in New Mexico. Perfect. This is the kind of stuff we want to hear about. All right. Now, I am generally the same as most of the other instructors here for our virtual event, but typically I like to start with slides just to kind of contextualize. I am a visual learner and I like to read and I also like to hear. So be sure if you have questions, please use the Q&A if you are here live. And or the chat. We have some incredible people here from community support to help, as well as my folks here who are from Pro Genealogists, which is a part of Ancestry, who are here to help you get your questions answered. All right. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my initial beginning slides. So let's get clear from the beginning. How well researched is your tree? Now, for some of you may be beginning, right? So your tree may not be researched that well, and that's okay. You're going to spend the time going in doing the hardcore genealogy and family history research so that in that way you can make your best strides in trying to figure out which nations your family is connected to. Okay, so do your due diligence. What do I mean by how well researched is your tree? Did you start from now, currently living generations, and then go back throughout time, generation by generation, validating the connections that your family has that are on paper? That's sound genealogy research. We don't throw that out for the sake of trying to connect back to a Native American group or even a famous person. Sometimes people make finding the connection back to a Native American group or back to a famous person their sole goal in genealogy, when in reality, you want to naturally run into those things. You do not want to shoehorn your family tree into this perspective where its sole focus is to try to validate this Native American connection or this connection back to a notable person. You want to just naturally run into those things. So focus on sound genealogy first, okay? Secondly, which Native American nation are you supposed to be connected to? That's number one. How well researched is your tree? What nation are you supposed to be connected to? And then next to that, which nations actually inhabited the area where your family lived? Okay. Sometimes, and I've heard this a lot, folks will say, oh, I heard that my family is Blackfoot. But when you go into the research into where that person's family lived, the Blackfoot Nation was never there. They were never there. So what is it? Again, if you've researched your tree well enough and you know the locations where your ancestors were living, you should be able to find a group that matches the oral history that you have. If you're finding a conflict, you have to resolve the conflict. Okay. So how well researched is your tree? Number two, what is the nation that you're supposed to be connected to based on the oral history? And number three, which nations inhabited the area where your family lived? Now, beyond that, when did those nations live there? For a large number of First Nations or Indigenous groups, they were in certain portions of the country, in the United States, or even in Canada and other locations. And then they were forcibly removed through treaties and wars and all kinds of other things to other places. And they ended up where they are generally now. We're going to talk about some of this forced migration through the vantage point of my connection to the Cherokee Nation, because that's a seminal part of the story in a second. But that's important because if you're hearing, oh, we're this particular nation, you go to research the geography of that spot and who was living there, and you don't find that that group was there when your family was there, but maybe they were there, 100 years before that, you would still have to place your family in that spot in that time when those people were there. Okay. Now, do the records that document these nations still survive? That's the other thing. So maybe let's say you have the oral history, you've done the tree research, the oral history is pointing back to a nation that is where your family lived. Your family lived there during the time in which those nations were there. Then the question is, what survives? What records survive, and who has them? Now, if you're talking about a nation that is a federally recognized nation, a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, the federal government, the US federal government, or the federal government, wherever you are living, if you're in Canada, elsewhere, is going to have official records, whether rolls, censuses, a number of different things, right? Where folks were having to either claim citizenship or put their name in to receive an annuity or some sort of a payout or some sort of a benefit as a result of something that involved the federal government. And with those federally recognized tribes, you tend to have that more often. But then there's nations where they have maintained their own records. And that means that they have lists of people who were enrolled as citizens in those nations previously. We're talking about ancestors as well as currently living people. And so the question is, do the records survive? And then from there, who actually has them? Okay. And so there's a great comments coming in the chat. There are folks that are saying they're suspected Apache based off of the region, that people are Cherokee. They also have Cheyenne, Ojibwe, Iroquois. There's a lot of different nations being placed here. And so again, if you've got the oral history, you've got the tree, you've got the folks in the region, your family was living there, who has the record to substantiate this? And here's the thing, even if you do have federal records, and some of these could include the US Census, right? Which you're going to see in a second. I'm going to share a lot of records today. Even if you have those things available and you still have this oral history and you have the geography, you have all the things, there is still a possibility that you might not find your family in the records. That sounds like a little bit of a letdown. Right. There still is a possibility that you might not find your family documented in these records. And it could be for a number of different reasons. I have DNA cousins where their family's on the 1880 census and they're living in northeastern Texas. And it says that their ancestor was born in the Cherokee Nation and that their parents were born in the Cherokee Nation. But beyond that, they have no connection going back to the Cherokee Nation in terms of records. The only connection that our family has is that I have the oral history that my great great grandmother had two brothers sold away as enslaved people, and they were sold in Texas. I don't have names, but as a result of DNA matching and me doing traditional genealogy research, I know that my DNA matches ancestor is the brother of my great great grandmother. Now, could those cousins apply for citizenship? They could try, but it would be extremely hard because the records with which are used to validate your connection back to the nation, which the nation determines that, would not document their ancestor because of certain stipulations. Many people typically are trying to trace Native American ancestry because they want to be able to apply for citizenship in the nation. And the litmus test for genealogy and connection, right, is not necessarily the same as tribal stuff. Each nation has different standards, and it all depends on that respective nation. I can speak very soundly to the Cherokee Nation because I went through that process. It goes by lineal descent. It has to be on paper, and you have to trace back to ancestors on specific roles as designated by the nation. You cannot use, for the most part, you cannot use DNA. So if you thought that you could take a test and you could submit the results, you can't. No, you still have to provide the paperwork. Okay. All right. So, how to confirm Native American roots. Okay. We talked about traditional genealogy, right? You're going to do that, go from now backwards. Federal records I talked about. The US Census is one. You have specific Indian censuses and things, in particular, the 1900 US Census has a special enumeration towards the back of a enumeration district that lists down the connection of those respective people to the respective nations. You also have things like the Dawes cards and the Dawes rolls and the Dawes applications and allotments. You have Guion Miller or Eastern Cherokee. We're going to talk about all of this stuff. We're going to use my family as the proxy because, again, this is the way that you back into it as opposed to chasing it itself. Okay. And so there's lots of different federal records, state level records. Once we get to, especially in a state like Oklahoma, which didn't become a state until 1907, you have tribal records, right? And then when statehood happens in Oklahoma, you then have state level records. Same things like marriage licenses, deeds and conveyances, probates, all that stuff that you would have in any other scenario, you would have those as well. But where Native American records differ is that we also have the additional layer of tribal records, okay? Because we have our own nations. These nations were countries and still are countries within the bounds of the United States. So yes, we're US citizens, but we're also citizens of our respective nations. And that means that the nations had courts, they had, and they had all the jurisdictional stuff that you would have at the state level now. We had that within our respective nations, which means we have an additional layer of records that everyone else likely does not have. And then the other ways that you can confirm as well is through genetic genealogy and not in the ways that you were potentially thinking about it. Most people think, oh, well, if I take a DNA test like Ancestry DNA and I look at all my respective origins locations, right? If I've got Indigenous Americas Mexico, if I've got Indigenous Americas, and I have a certain percentage, that is going to entitle me to connection primarily and or citizenship in a respective nation. No, each nation determines their standards for citizenship, and you have to look that up to determine what that is. But if you're looking to just confirm the oral history, you can do a number of things. You can look at your DNA matches, meaning what is going on in their trees. Are all of these matches that you have in common with your known family members, are they connecting you back to a respective nation? Do you keep seeing the same person and the same family tree amongst those DNA matches that are connected to your known family members? Is it going back to a respective nation? Do you keep seeing the Choctaw Nation and Dawes cards connected back to the specific Choctaw family? Do you keep seeing that? Do you have admixture regions that are above 5%, right? Where something is like glaring, like whoop, 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 it's sending you a signal. Do you have DNA journeys that are going back to certain respective locations within wherever you're living that connect directly back to indigenous groups or people within those locations? That's how you can use DNA. But again, it is not the only thing. It is there as a verifier, okay? It helps to build out and round out the genealogical research. All right. You all have a lot of comments. I'm glad that you all are commenting so well. All right. So let's jump in because a lot of people will get oral history around being Cherokee. I got it myself. Okay. I did not believe it. I'm just going to go on record and say I didn't believe it. I was told my grandmother was Cherokee. Okay. And now that I know and I've had more experience doing research in this for a number of years, now I know that I should have seen that the hallmarks were there, but I didn't necessarily see them as hallmarks. So let's talk about what qualifiers are. Again, if you've done your sound research, we're looking at time and we're looking at location. If you have Cherokee ancestry in particular, we're talking about the pre and post removal time period. What is that? We mean prior to the Trail of Tears, okay, or prior to any removal. If we're speaking about the Cherokee, we're speaking specifically circa 1812 or so. And the reason why we have to qualify it is that there was a group of Cherokee who left prior to the forced removal, and they were called old settlers. Those were folks who voluntarily left the Cherokee Nation in the east and moved to what now is northwestern Arkansas and northeastern Oklahoma, which is now northeastern Oklahoma is the Cherokee Nation Reservation. That's where it exists now. And there were old settlers who were moved prior to the Trail of Tears, and there were those who were forcibly removed once that took place. Okay. Where were they living before the removal? They were in these locations. Okay. And you notice I'm not throwing out counties because county boundary lines are more of a more recent existence. Where our people lived, it was in a geographical area that could encompass a number of different places. Okay. And so, with that said, in North Carolina, we've got western counties in North Carolina, western counties in South Carolina. We've got northern counties in Alabama and eastern counties in Tennessee. And if you look at the map, it kind of gives you a general vicinity. Like you can draw like a big blob or a circle that goes around these areas. And that is where the Cherokee Nation was. Again, this is prior to removal. As well as Georgia. We have to figure that in as well, right? So we've got North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, and Georgia. For any nation, again, that you are trying to find connections to, again, location and time and when those people were there is paramount and it's important, okay? And so we've got those places. Now, post removal, we're specifically talking about northeastern Oklahoma and particular counties. The reason why we're saying particular counties and not just eastern Oklahoma is because you have several nations from the 5 tribes that settled or that were forcibly removed into eastern Oklahoma. The 5 tribes are the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Muskogee Creek, and Seminole nations. Okay, those nations, as well as several others, end up being forcibly removed into Oklahoma. And that is where their homeland is now. Now, these nations also don't just have one. So, Cherokee Nation in particular, we have the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. And then we also have the Eastern Cherokee, right? Those are the folks that did not remove. And then we also have the United Keetoowah Band, which is also the Cherokee Indians. So, we've got 3 different groups that make up the Cherokee Nation. You also have with the Choctaw, you have the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. You also have the Mississippi Choctaw. Same set of people. There was a group that removed, there was a group that didn't remove. Okay. Got to get your qualifiers there. All right. So for Cherokee in particular, again, this is the same process for everyone, but I'm just using the Cherokee as our example. You're looking at Washington, Nowata, Craig, Ottawa, the northern portion of Tulsa County, Rogers, Mays, Delaware, Cherokee, Adair, Muskogee, Sequoia, and the eastern portion of McIntosh County in current day Oklahoma. Additionally, you can also look at counties in Texas and other states. Why? Because people migrated there. For instance, if you have connections to the Cherokee Nation, if you recall during the removal time, there were a section of Cherokees who actually did not go to what is now what was the Indian Territory in northeastern Oklahoma. They actually went to Mexico looking to settle there, and Mexico was like, nope. And then they ended up going back to the Indian Territory or going to the Indian Territory. So there are some folks that ended up, again, you think of things like the Chisholm Trail, all of that. So you're looking at Cherokee, Gregg, Smith, Rusk, and Van Zandt counties in Texas. And then again, we're talking removal. Some of those early folks, especially old settlers, initially settled in northwestern Arkansas, which is like the area around Fort Smith. You also have people who during the Civil War went up into Kansas to escape some of the battles. So you have eastern counties in Kansas, as well as southwestern counties in Missouri. You have to, oh, interesting. You have to agree about Mexico saying no. Okay, well, you can have your opinion. The folks didn't stay there. They ended up going back. Either way, broad locations. Okay. So with that said, let's get into our live demo of what this looks like. Now, one of the things that I want to share with you all is that, especially if you're not really clear around locations and where your family was living, one of the tools that you could use in this would be using the tree mapper in Pro Tools on Ancestry. And if you don't have Pro Tools, I highly suggest getting it because it's a way in which you can drill your tree down to the locations that are the most prevalent or that are mentioned the most within your respective tree. So let me go ahead and share this screen. All right, so you are looking at the live tree mapper for my tree that is on Ancestry. And the darker the location, the more people who are mentioned in that respective place. And so if you are, again, if we got oral history, we're looking purely on what the facts are telling us that are in our tree. One of the cheat codes that you could use is you could zoom in all the way down to the county level to see where the most prevalent locations are in your respective tree. For me, look at how dark Nowata County, Oklahoma is, Craig County, Oklahoma, Ottawa County, Oklahoma, Delaware County, Oklahoma, Mays County, right? Rogers, right? Osage, even Washington County, you all. Look at this. Tulsa. So if I wasn't sure, or if I was like, this is telling me you've got a bunch of locations, a bunch of events that have happened there. This is where you need to be looking. You may not even be in the right location. This is available through Pro Tools. This is one of the features of Pro Tools. In addition to matches of matches and the charts and reports, you can get this tree view with this map. Okay. Now zoom out even more. Remember, I talked about the eastern counties in Kansas. You're seeing the same thing. Northwest or southwestern Missouri, same thing. It should match up, you all. It should match up. All right. Now, here's my grandma. This is my connection to the Cherokee Nation. Isn't she a beautiful lady? I love this picture. I've always wanted to redo it. Um, but my hair is not long enough. I might have to make it a weave or something in order to totally redo it. But this is the proverbial grandmother with the long hair and the high cheekbones for me. Everyone does tell me I do look like her. In fact, I feel like I look more like her sister than I look like her. On this side of the family, everyone has a doppelganger, and it typically is not like their direct relation. It's going to be an aunt or a first cousin, which is strange, but it's good. So my grandmother, I knew was born in Veneta, Oklahoma. That's the history that I had. Had I known where Veneta was, I would have dug in. Veneta is in Nowata County. It's right there. And again, if we're on our little map and you go in and you click, it'll actually, I'm sorry, Veneta is in Craig. You'll see I can click on that county and it'll give me all the events and people that are there, including the fact that my great grandparents were married there and all sorts of other stuff happened in that respective county. So grandma, born in Oklahoma, got the oral history that she is Cherokee. Okay. So if I'm doing sound genealogy research, I'm building her tree out. Okay. This is what I have for my grandmother's tree. Now, when I first started my genealogy journey, I only had the names of my grandmother's parents. That was it. I have my grandmother's birth certificate, which gave me the names of my great grandparents. And here's the other thing. If you look, both of my great grandparents died by the time my grandmother was 18. Both of her parents had passed away. So I didn't necessarily have, my grandmother didn't grow up with her parents that long. And thankfully, my grandmother lived until 1998, so I could ask her questions. But even at that point, I wasn't at the stage in which I'm at now with genealogy, so I still had to let the records lead me. And so, with that said, there are several things that came up, and I want to make sure that I give you all some resources. Number one, there's a link that we'll post in the chat for the card catalog and to search by the term Indian. Okay, what does that do? That provides you with a listing within the Ancestry set of collections as to records that mention the term Indian. And they could be from a number of different sources. We'll see here Orders and Council of Indigenous Indian Enfranchisement Records in Canada, Dawes cards for the Indian Territory, letters received by the Office of Indian Affairs, applications for Indian War Service records. So we've got wars that not necessarily Indigenous people, but it may be involving Indigenous people. Reservation rolls, wills, all kinds of stuff, allotment records. And I kept this link to just across the board internationally. Okay. So there are 153 collections. Then you can also go in and search for respective nations within this to see if there are specific collections there. Additionally, if we're talking about Plains nations, okay, you're going to be primarily looking at records for that are on Indian census rolls. Okay, they're going to place this link in the chat. So what are these? Look at these: Shawnee, Apache, Bad River Chippewa. We've got, gosh, Carlisle school records, and we know about that, of this forced schooling amongst Native American people. The Mississippi Choctaw in here, Navajo, and these could be every year or intermittently. Look at this list. There are a lot of records within this collection. I was still scrolling. It's a lot of scrolling. Okay. We're going to talk about DOS cards. Someone's asking what that is in the chat. We're going to get to that in a second. Then when we're talking about the Indian Territory, primarily the 5 tribes, again, Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Muskogee Creek, and Seminole nations, we're specifically talking about Oklahoma and Indian Territory. Now, again, I want to juxtapose this. You have federal records like federal censuses or even Indian censuses like you saw, but we also have that rolls for the nations, okay? So if we go into browse this collection and look, you'll see that there are rolls for each nation. So again, remember I talked about federal records, you've got state records, and then you've got tribal level records. Within the nations, we have censuses that are not on the same year as the US Census. So US Census 1950, 40, 30, 20, 10, 1900, then you skip to 1880, 1870, 1860, 50, 40, 30, right? You keep going back, okay? Prior to 1900, in the Indian Territory, we had tribal rolls. And what you're looking at are different tribal rolls, and they're intermittent. Again, typically these lists are created to, there's some sort of annuity, a case, something where you have to establish citizenship in order for you to get a right and title to a thing. So generally that is usually when these lists were created, or they're just a census. So for Cherokee Nation, we've got 1867, we've got intruders. I have an ancestor on the intruders list, which is crazy because he was enslaved in the Cherokee Nation and was Cherokee, but that's a whole other story. We've got a census in 1880, 1883, 86, 90, 93, 96. Then there's rolls specifically for freedmen, those who were formerly enslaved in the Cherokee Nation. Then you've got 1903 rolls for the Chickasaw, Choctaw rolls. Then there's several Creek rolls. Then there's Delaware rolls. There's all kinds of rolls specifically. Okay. Now, someone's asking about Taino records. Okay. Those, where is the link to these records? Oh, thank you. They're going to put it in the chat. Thanks for asking, Terry Ligon. I know him. That's why I'm messing with him. Who are intruders? Those are people who did not have, based on the tribal government, did not have approval to live within the confines of their country. Okay. Consider them to be undocumented in the way that we talk about undocumented people today, right? Do they have permission to be here? That's what it is. They will be considered intruders. Native Alaskans, please, such as Eskimos. Again, you're going to go back and see. You can even do things like if you go to search and then go to all collections, you want to look at a respective state and pull up what the records are that are there. Okay, so instead of just going to ancestry.com and then going to search, you can go to search all collections and then browse down by the state or click the state here to see which records are available for respective Native American nations. Okay, hopefully I'm answering some. How far back do the rolls go? It depends on the nation and what's available. There early rolls I've seen. I've seen rolls, in particular, if I talk about Cherokee Nation, you've got rolls of people who were voluntarily removing. That stuff is in the 1810s, circa 1810s. And then you've got 1835. You've got rolls that early. And let's see. Now, in terms of someone's asking a question about reclassification from Indian to Negro, that may have happened in locations like Virginia when you have people who are in legislative roles, someone like Walter Plecker who comes in and reclassifies a group of people who have connections back to indigenous groups into a different racial designation. That did not necessarily happen everywhere else. It all depends, right? And when we start getting into some of the politics, some of these things start to happen once the nations start to work with or deal with the federal government more intimately. In particular, you see this manifest in things like the fact that the Dawes cards, which we're going to talk about in just a second, the fact that they were segregated, that the formerly enslaved of the five tribes were on separate freedmen cards that did not have blood quantum. And even the concept of blood quantum is considered to be a federal government instituted thing. We can have a debate about that all day long. But there's no blood quantum on the freedmen cards. But the by blood have a blood quantum. But then you can have someone who's on a freedman card who's on the 1900 census and they're in the special Indian census with the blood quantum. It's going to be weird paradoxes all day. Okay. I should have warned you about that from the beginning. All right. So let's jump into the actual genealogy here. Let's go back to Grandma Lois. Okay. Here she is in 1950 in Chicago. Okay. She's there. Highlighted person is my father, her son. He's 12 years old at that particular time. My grandfather, who at this point is known as Jack Sewell, the man had 7 aliases, but on this day in 1950, he was Jack Sewell. He's there with his wife, Lois. She is born in Oklahoma. She was working at a department store in Chicago called Linton's, and my grandfather worked as a grocery clerk on the South Side. So we've got the connection back to Oklahoma here. She's 30, my father is 12, and my aunt is 11. All right. Now let's go back 10 years. Well, we can't go back 10 years because neither one of my grandparents or my father or my aunt are on the 1940 census. And some of you may hear this and go, are you serious? And I'm 100% serious. I have several immediate family members that are not on the 1940 census. In fact, I've heard anywhere from 1 to 2 million African Americans were not counted on that census. So if you don't find family members on 1940, don't think that it's just a fluke and it's just your family. I'm telling you, as someone who does this every day, that my family was not on that census. Not my dad, not my aunt, his sister, my paternal grandparents, and not even my uncle on my mother's side. That's how prolific the undercount was. All right, so because we don't have 40, we do have records, right? For that, you replace that with things like World War II draft cards and city directories and newspaper articles. So yes, I know that they were living at that time. It's just that that one federal record is not available. Okay. Thank you. Terry added some great feedback for many people on the Dawes card that had a recognized citizen as a parent or ancestor. The rear of the card implies their blood connection, but was deliberately omitted by the Dawes Commission. That is exactly accurate. You're going to actually see some of that in a second. So we went from 50 in Chicago to Kansas City. Now, if you have any connection to the five tribes, 9 times out of 10, you are going to have a connection back to Kansas City, Kansas, or Missouri. Like it's a, like, I can say the sky is blue. If you have a connection back to the five tribes, you're going to go back to Kansas City, Kansas, or Missouri. At some point, someone moved there. So on this census, this is my grandmother as a 10-year-old girl. She's born in Oklahoma. Her father's born in Oklahoma. Her mother's born in Kansas. They're in the same household as her mom, Clara, my great grandmother, and her stepfather, John Levy. And there are Uncle Wilbert, Uncle Cooey, as well as 2 step siblings. I never met these Levy people, so I can't tell you where they are, but I know where Uncle Wilbert and Uncle Cooey ended up. And so they're living on North 6th Street in Kansas City, Kansas. Okay. Now, for me as a child, I knew the connection back to Kansas because of my grandmother's siblings living there. And I knew my grandmother was born in Oklahoma, but I couldn't understand how she got to Chicago and then out to LA where I was born, but she was born in Oklahoma. It was 3 different states. Now I know because I've done the genealogy research. So we went from 50 to 30 in Kansas City, and then we're going to move to the 1920 census. And the 1920 census, my grandmother is just a year old, but they are in Craig County, Oklahoma. And we know this is the right household because we've got Aunt Edna, my grandmother's oldest sister, Aunt Clarence, and yes, her name was Clarence. She was a girl. This is not a typo. Aunt Iris Dean, Uncle Wilbert, Uncle Cooey, along with my great grandfather, Cooey. They referred to him as Cooey, or it was a nickname for Cooey, which means cool water, which is a district in the Cherokee Nation before we get to statehood. And everyone's doing what they need to do in terms of locations. Cooey's born in Oklahoma. He owns his land. Key. Okay. And not like kiki and laugh, but I mean, this is a key thing to pay attention to. 1920, he's in Township 5 of Craig County, Oklahoma. This is a sign, you all. He's owning his land and he's born in Oklahoma. This is telling you something. Pay attention, okay? Now, something that's interesting here is, again, he's a farmer. He's working on his own account, okay? So we've got that. So we've got 1950, 1930 census, 1920 census. Now, if we go to my great grandfather's death certificate, this is what one thing is going to pull his parents' information. Okay, so if I didn't know, I could get a copy of his death certificate. I did. He died in Nowata County, which is right next to Craig County. He was only 41 years old, and it lists his parents as Ike Rogers and Sally Van. The informant on this is Clara Rogers. Now, I got this from the Oklahoma vital statistics. I just went on the website, printed out the form, sent the money, and then they sent this back to me. So if I didn't know the names of his parents, I could easily pull it on a record like this, which is his death certificate. I even have oral history about what happened when he died, and the fact that he had suffered like a hemorrhage, and my uncles Wilbur and Cooey put him in the wagon to take him to the doctor, and he died in the wagon. I know that happened because my uncles mentioned the story. It got passed down in the family. Now, let's say I didn't have this death certificate. I could easily move to his draft card. Again, we're doing nothing more than traditional genealogy, but it is placing me in the right place. Again, the oral history says my grandmother's Cherokee. All of these records going back earlier than her childhood are putting my family in the right place at the right time. So here he is, Cooey Van Rogers, and he's in Nowata County. Clara is listed as his wife. There's his signature. This is as of 1918. So this is the year before my grandmother is born. Okay. He passes away in 1923. My grandmother's on the 1920 census with him. We've got his death certificate. We got this draft card. So then naturally we want to move prior to this. So we go to 1910. We're not skipping any genealogical steps here. I am not privileging the Cherokee and saying, hey, my family's in the right location. That's it. No, I'm still doing sound genealogy research. Okay. Yes. Great call out. Want to look at the image of the original document, not just go by what the transcription says. Absolutely. That is, you need to be, you notice I'm not on indexes here. I'm in the actual records. You need to make sure that you do that. Thank you for putting that out, Terry. Terry's adding some great feedback, and everything he's saying is very accurate. One aspect of the birthplace for some people shows Oklahoma as their place of birth in 1920. Pay attention to their age. The place of birth for anyone born before 1907 should read as Indian Territory. Absolutely. So we get to 10. Same thing. Cooey, Clara, Edna, Clarence, Iris Dean. Those are the only children that they have at this point. He owns his land. He's working on his own account. He's literate. So is his wife. And his oldest child is going to school. Okay. So we're doing nothing more than sound genealogy. Okay. Now, at this point, we can then move to the 1900 census because we've already gone. Grandma was on 50. She was on 30. She was on 20. Then on 10, she's not alive. We moved to her parents. They're on 10. Now we're at 1900. 1900. Note the location. Indian Territory, Cherokee Nation. How accurate is the information on the census names, dates, and ages? It all depends on who reported the information. We don't know who reported the information until we get to the 1940 and 1950 census. So it could have come from the people in the household, or it could have come from a neighbor. And that may be the reason why there's variance in the years. But as long as the family groups and structures stay the same, that's what you care about, right? If we go from census to census, this is very clear that this is the same family because they never left Oklahoma until they get to Kansas City in 1930, right? Before that, they're in the same area in Northeast Oklahoma. So now we've got Township 26 in the Cherokee Nation. It clearly says County Cherokee, State Indian Territory. It's Township 26 North, Range 16 East. It's even giving you the legal land description. Here you have Cooey, born in the Indian Territory. It says that. He's listed as a partner to Nelson Rogers. Nelson Rogers is not his partner, as in he's working with him or even from a relationship standpoint. Nelson was his brother. That was his older brother. How do I know that? Because I have DAWS, DAWES cards for both of them, and their parents' names are listed the same. Okay? So we've got them living together. Cooey's not married to my great grandmother yet. Okay? This is 1900. They're working on the same farm. Okay? Now we're going to go back to some other records here because I skipped over some stuff. Okay? So let's see. Where is. All right. So for Dawes, we're going to hop into this boat now. I'm going to load all of these images. I talked about vital records. If we go to vital records, okay, we're going reverse chronologically speaking. Look at what this marriage license says for my great grandparents. USA, United States of America, Indian Territory, Northern District. Cooey Rogers of Cooties Bluff, who's 21, marries Clara Allen of Cooties Bluff, Indian Territory on January 22nd of 1903. This is another record that is placing us in the right place at the right time. Okay. So they get married in 1903. He's on the census as a single man in 1900. Okay. So let me pull this over here. So we're in our reverse order. Okay. Now, Dawes cards. Okay. These establish your right to citizenship in the respective nation. In 1901, May 17th of 1901, Grandpa Cooey applies for citizenship in the Cherokee Nation. Okay. Look at the location of where he is living. Cooties Bluff. Okay. And if you go back to the actual marriage license, which is here, he's living in Cooties Bluff in 1903. His Dawes card tells us that he is also in Cooties Bluff. So we know we have the right person. Name Cooey Van Rogers. Another key, if he was enrolled by the Dawes Commission, he's going to have a number stamped right here. This is what entitles me to my citizenship. Is the fact that my great-grandfather went through the process of Dawes. He showed up to the court. He gave the respective proof as to his tie or connections back to the nation, and that validated him being able to not only become a citizen of the nation or retain his citizenship, but also get a land allotment. The Dawes process was 3 parts. It has a card that corresponds with an application packet, and then once you go through the application process and they approve you, then you get a land allotment. Now, his proof was the 1896 tribal roll. If you recall, when we went back over here to our respective records in the card catalog or in Oklahoma, there were several census rolls. So I'm going to take you back to all collections. We're going to go to Oklahoma. And remember, I talked about these censuses and rolls. We were on this page before. And we go and look at these rolls, there's a Cherokee census for 1896. So if we go back to his Dawes card, that was his basis for his tribal enrollment, was the fact that he was on the 1896 roll. Okay. It also notes the number and page he was on and how they referred to his name. And it also tells me that his mother was on 1880 roll, and it gives me her number. And it says the district she lived in as well as her name. Now, for Cherokee Nation, if somebody is considered by blood, they only have one side of their card, okay? But if they are designated as a freedman, freedmen have 2 sides. You also want to pay attention to the fact that it says slave of. Because my great-grandfather was born in the 1880s, slavery was abolished. Now, slavery did not get abolished in the Indian Territory until 1866. Because of the treaties of 1866. In the U.S. proper, it ended in 1865. So it wasn't until a year later. Regardless, he was born in the 1880s, so he himself was not enslaved, but his parents were enslaved. So if we flip over this freedman card, we're going to see on the back side, whoops, let me go back, that it has the names of his parents, and on a by blood card, you get the parents' names on the front part. Okay? So Bible card, name of the person, blood quantum, parents' names. That's it. All you're getting is on that front part. If you have a freedman card, the back of the card is going to be where you're going to get the parents' names and their slaveholder. So here's his father, Ike Rogers. You all hear me talk about him a lot. Here he is behind my head. Of course, he's got to be here with me as I'm giving this presentation. No, it says he's dead by 1901, which is when my great grandfather applied for his citizenship. He lived in the Kewaskum district. His slaveholder was named Elzira Price May. And then we've got the name of his mother, Sally Van. Again, all of this is on the death certificate that I got from the Oklahoma vital statistics, right? But if I hadn't gotten that, I could still go to the Dawes cards. Ike Rogers did not have a card because he dropped dead, or I'm sorry, he was murdered before we got to Dawes. Okay. So note, there is no owner for Sally Van. Notice Ike Rogers has a slaveholder, but Sally Van does not. That's because Sally Van was a free person of color living in the Cherokee Nation. Different story that you're not probably used to hearing. Some of you are like, well, wait a minute, enslavement? Yes. The 5 tribes practiced chattel slavery, and their citizens enslaved people. My ancestors were enslaved by Cherokees. And we weren't just enslaved by Cherokees, we also were descendants of Cherokees by blood. It was a both. Most of the people that I know that are connected back to the 5 tribes in this particular way were not, our ancestors are not just enslaved people. We also have blood, or we also have blood connection ties back to people who were considered by blood. All right, so what also happened as a result of my great grandfather getting his citizenship is that my grandmother's 2 oldest siblings were Dawes enrollees. Okay, so that meant that my great grandfather got his citizenship, right? They gave it, he applied in 1901, he got it, he got his land allotment. Then he came back later and he enrolled my grandmother's 2 older sisters. So if you go back, remember to that 1910 census and 1920 census, you see the 2 oldest girls, Edna and Clarence. Look at the name of their father. It lists the father's roll number. If we go back to Grandpa Cooey's card, you'll see the roll number is going to match. 2056, 2056. It matches. The name of their mother. Note they said that their mother was a non-citizen. Technically, my great-grandmother was a Cherokee freedman, but she was not enrolled. She applied and she was rejected. But my great-grandfather was. He made it through the process. Okay. No, it gives you their birth date, you all. Then it gives you the proof that they used. Application for number 1 and 2 received May 18th, 1906. Parents of number 1, meaning on this list, married February 1st, 1903. That's exactly what we just got from that marriage license, right? All of this, again, this is why I'm telling you, you're going to run into this. You are not going to chase it. Okay? Run into it. So if you're paying any attention to this, look at how you can get multiple generations worth of information off of these records. Now, rejections, what does that mean? When we're talking about the 5 tribes in particular, this means that my great-grandmother's mother, we know this for a fact, her mother was enslaved by Cherokee, okay? And her grandparents were enslaved by Cherokee. But my family left the Indian Territory during the Civil War and went up into Kansas. And one of the stipulations for the Treaty of 1866 in the Cherokee Nation with the federal government is that you had to return back to the Cherokee Nation within 6 months of the treaty. And my great-grandmother and great-great-grandmother could not prove that they had returned back to the Cherokee Nation within that time. And as a result, they were rejected from being able to become citizens of the nation. So I derived my citizenship from my great-grandfather, not my great-grandmother, because she was rejected. But here's the reason why that matters, but it doesn't. Remember, I talked about there being a card, an application, and a land allotment. You are going to miss the most important part of this story. Many of you are sitting there like, "Ooh, this card, yeah, woohoo, and this card, yeah, woohoo." Go to the application. Note, okay, this number here, 854, is the same number that is in the corner up here. This corresponds to the application packet, okay? So if a person was enrolled, you got a Dawes roll number. If they applied, you got a field number. The field number corresponds with an application. This is not just a folder. What comes first, the card or the application? It's the card. Go through the application. Why? Here's why. May 17th, 1901, my great grandfather goes before the Dawes Commission and they ask him interrogatories. What is your name? Cooey Van Rogers. How old are you? About 20. What is your post office? Cootie's Bluff. What district do you live? Cooey. Who is it that you want to have enrolled besides yourself? Just myself. How long have you lived in the Cherokee Nation? All my life. So if I didn't have any, again, remember, if I just have oral history, if I just have location, if my people are there at the right time, that's great. But now I have proof that my family was in the nation prior to my great grandfather applying. He is telling me this. This is not, oh, Nika just, no, we are reading his words. This is why you go to the application. My great grandmother and my great great grandmother have files just like this. So go back to these cards, you all. Why? Because there could be multiple generations who applied. And if you find your family groups, you keep going through the applications, it will contextualize your family history. This is why I'm here, Gabrielle. She knew about the card, but she didn't know about the application. Some of y'all might be getting the cards and thinking that they're your people, but you're not taking the extra step of going through the application to see if it's actually them. Yes, I don't play. I'm here to help y'all and keep you all up all night. I am the nights and weekends killer when it comes to genealogy. I want you not getting sleep. I want you getting finds and discoveries. This is what I'm here for. Okay? So he says he's been there his entire life. Give his father's name, Isaac Rogers. Where do you all think they're getting this information for the card from? They're asking and they're interviewing the people. His dad, Isaac Rogers, mother's name, Sally Van. Is she dead? Yes. How long has your father been dead? Ever since the Hayden payment. So here he is telling me around the payment he died. I know he got assassinated at the train depot by the brother of an Indian outlaw. That's another webinar we could talk about. How long has your mother been dead? Ever since I was a baby. I don't remember her. What's her name on the roll? Is it Rogers or Van? It's Sally Van. And they go through the evidence. 1880 roll, we got Sally Van Rogers. Okay. And then they asked if there's a Carrie Rogers. No, because they got his name transposed. His name is Cooey. Then they substantiate with 1896. Is there another child older than Eddie? Wait a minute. Who is Eddie? So now I got to go and find Eddie's application to find out how Eddie is connected back to Cooey. Now, Cooey's application is very straightforward, you all, and it's only a few pages. But if someone got rejected, my great-grandmother's is more than 100 pages because they went back several times with witnesses and evidence to try to substantiate their claim, and they were not able to do it. Now, again, card, application, if they got rejected, there is no allotment. But if there's a card and an application and they get approved, then you move into an allotment. And the allotment gives you the legal land description of where your family's land allotment was. And you're looking at all these postmark things. You're getting the legal land description of the allotment. Okay. There's a lot of information here. All right. We could spend a whole session just on the allotment. But when we get into the tribal rolls, you all, there's a lot of stuff here. Here's the 1896 roll that my great grandfather was on that substantiated his claim. Here he is with his stepmother, Sarah Rogers, and there he is. There's his brother Nelson, and then he is here 15 years of age. And note, they tell you they derived their citizenship and right of Sally Van Rogers, who was their mother. Here's another tribal roll. Here's the one from 1890. And it's by household. Here's Sarah Rogers again, the stepmother. And here's Cooey Rogers in the household. Okay. These are all Cherokee rolls. Cooey District, Cherokee Nation, 1890. Another roll. You all see again. Remember I told you, run into it. See, I didn't rush to get there. I still did my genealogy research, but I ran into it. You see how the records just keep coming out of the wall? If your family is connected to one of these nations, this is exactly what's going to happen. You are not going to have to try to, scrape and go up. No, you're going to find it very easily. Here's the 1880 Cherokee census. Here is Sally Van Rogers. If you note, you all, one of the cheats for this Cherokee census is that they give you the Dawes enrollment number, that field number. They wrote it in here for you. So if I go back to this Dawes card of my great grandfather, and I've noticed that his field number is 854. If I go over to the next field number, I'm going to get his brother. Whoops, I went too far. Oh, whoops. His brother's 853. Should have went the opposite direction. Here we go. Nelson V. Rogers, field number 853. Okay. Here we are on the 1880 Cherokee census. It's telling us Freedman 853. This is a cheat code. They give you the Dawes number in 1880, and you're like, wait a minute, but the Dawes happened after that. Yes, they came back. They used this 1880 as a litmus test for when if people were back in time based on the treaty. And because they used that, they wrote in the Dawes numbers next to people where they found them on 1880. So this is a cheat code. Now, this one is for free. See Clem Van Rogers, you all? This is Will Rogers' father. You said, wait, Jessica said, wait, who is? Clement Van Rogers, as in Will Rogers? This is him right here. Yes. Some of y'all like, what? Absolutely. He was a slaveholder. His father was a slaveholder. Y'all see again, I walked y'all through this whole thing. This is my great great grandmother. This is my great grandfather's brother. Because this is alphabetical, this is in the R's. Clement Van Rogers, this is Will Rogers' dad. Again, look, they telling you right here, he's a politician. That's his job. Okay. Now, we're almost at time, and I've been answering questions throughout. But I want to go to another role, especially when we're talking about the formerly enslaved. Here's the Saline District of the Cherokee Nation. This is in 1867. Sally Van, who's the daughter of Jesse Van and Katie Van, this is my second great grandmother, and these are her two parents in 1867. I even have a Kansas State census where they went back into Kansas and they came back down to the Cherokee Nation to ensure that they would get their citizenship. It's a lot. Again, you notice there's no shortage of records confirming any of this. Now, to touch on some more, there are people, again, I talked about blood quantum on the census. Uncle Bill Van, who was the brother of Jesse, who I just showed you on that Tompkins roll in 1867, he is listed in the Indian population schedules. He is 104 years old and is born in Georgia. Do the math. This is telling you that this man was forcibly removed with his slaveholder, meaning he walked the Trail of Tears. Because this is the 1900 census. I'm going to say that again. There's special Indian schedules at the end of the regular 1900 census. And on those, if people are marked as Black or Indian in various nations, they will give you a blood quantum. Uncle Bill, who was the brother of my third great grandfather, is listed on these Indian schedules. If you go down to his respective line, look here, special inquiries relating to Indians. This is on the 1900 census, regular census, it's towards the back. It gives you blood quantums. Other name, if any, tribe of Indian, tribe of father. And then you get into these hokey blood quantums that don't make sense. Some of y'all are shocked. I'm glad you are. Note, they also say they're Black. They tell you that. What is it? 15th, 16th. Isn't that a crazy? Right. That's why I tell people don't get caught up in this because it will not make sense to you. Last but not least, I know we've been on here for an hour and a little bit. More records. Again, I'm just giving you guys an overview from the vantage point of the Cherokee Nation, but there are a plethora of records like this for everyone else. Uncle Bill, who I was just telling you about, 104 on the Trail of Tears, his son applied for Eastern Cherokee or Guion Miller money. Whole separate thing. More records, you all. This is on fold 3. These applications, you all, are incredible. Why? Because they list 4 generations worth of family history on them. So Uncle Bill's son applies. He's living in Catoosa. Lists his birth year. Lists his parents' names, their Cherokee names, where they were living in 1851, when they died. When you go to the next page, he then lists his siblings and when they died. Then the names of the grandparents. Then the names of the aunts and uncles connected to the grandparents. So you all see how this is cyclical? It's going to send you to all the other people. So then that way you can, again, if I'm finding this in Uncle Bill's son's file, I can then go and look for his siblings who applied, cousins who applied, and it will help me reconstruct my family tree. Even though I don't have the same records like I do outside of the nation prior to 1900, I don't care because I got way more history here because of the federal government, because of the nation. Is this info on Ancestry? Yes, the info on Uncle Bill is on Ancestry. Here's the last thing I'm going to share about Uncle Bill because I know Terry has an interest in this. The folks got to arguing in the Indian Territory about who was the oldest person. And in the Veneta Weekly Chieftain in 1900, they had an article on Uncle Bill where they talked about him being 104 years old. And I will place this link in the chat because I know Terry wants this. So you have it. And it talks about him having his original bill of sale. He was sold to a slave trader bound to New Orleans at the age of 19. He has the original bill of sale, which was given him by his master. And then they reprinted it in the newspaper. Right. I didn't even get into newspapers in this area. I'm sure a part two would be lovely. I know I water hosed you all with a lot of information. But I wanted to show you number one, yes, you can validate this. Yes, it is possible. Yes, there are records. Yes, you can find connections. But sound genealogy is the most important thing, and you need to run into it as opposed to chasing it and making that your life's work. Once you do make a substantiated claim and connection, you are going to not run out of records. You will not. You will be able to stay. If literally you all, I could just research this side of my history and not touch any other branch of my family because there's still so much that's untapped. But I have other ancestors that love me and they want me to be around them. So, yes, if you want a part two, make sure you put the feedback in the evaluation. Um, you all have been excellent today. Thank you so much for all the people who are here. I'm going to try to get to some questions. Um, are there resources or tribal roles for either Pequot or Nagasette tribes from Rhode Island and Connecticut? Many were migrated to Brothertown, New York, and referred to as Brothertown Indians. That's the thing. Again, geography, figuring out who has the records and how to access them is probably the most important thing. And do the records survive? Should you do searches for Native Americans and searches for Indians? Absolutely, you can. It all depends on what the original record set was called. Sometimes we might call things more I don't want to say politically correct, but just more appropriate term for collections. So you may want to play around with that a little bit. Um, let's see. Lots of questions. Thank you all for staying, especially over time. And I know I sent a lot of information. You will get a recording to this, so you'll be able to fast forward it, rewind it, go to the sections that you need to. But again, if you want us to have a follow-up session, if you want to talk more, you want to go more in depth, you want to look at tribal roles, you want to look at some of these applications, how you connect the family groups together when doing that. Were rejections overturned? I have not seen that. Nope, have not. Have not. All right, you all. I sent in my DNA sample. Will Native American, it might show up there or it might not. It all depends. All right, you all. Thank you. You've been excellent. I hope this gives you a shot of energy to go and try and find this out. But again, don't chase it, run into it. Okay. Have a great afternoon.